everyone. I'm Megan Finnerty, and I am so excited you're here to join us at the Storytellers Project in USA Today for a live night, or evening, really. It's an evening in some parts of the country, of storytelling this evening. This evening, we're covering the arts. It's called I Made This, and so we're going to bring you true first-person stories from creatives across the nation. We're joining Humana and 5 Americans who are going to connect with you about the power of art in their lives, and hopefully in all of our lives. We know it's been a long year of probably not going out and experiencing live concerts, going to museums and all that. So we, in the anniversary of the lockdown, wanted to bring these artists to you in your house, connecting you directly with their hearts and their creative processes to bring you closer to the arts that make our lives worth living. Since 2016, the Storytellers Project has brought more than 100 shows each year to communities across the nation. But we're online only still because we know it kind of feels unsafe to be together in theaters, but it feels necessary to be together online. Although we are hoping you guys are getting vaccinated and that America's moving toward, normal times or new times as it is. We've handpicked incredible storytellers to bring you inspiring stories, interesting stories, compelling stories, moving stories about the creative process and the people behind it. We also want to remind you as you watch tonight's show, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or something like that, be sure to click the like buttons. You can say hi to your favorite storytellers in the chat, and we are going to bring them up right now. Are you guys ready? Say hello to Lindsey L from Nashville.
Hi,
Lindsey. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Heck yeah. Ellen Gould. Ellen, hello. Are you here?
Hi, Megan. So great to see you.
Hi, thank you too. Also, I want to point out Ellen and Lindsey have really great backgrounds because Ellen's got her Emmys in the background. Lindsey's got her tour stuff in the background. I see you guys. I see your stage design here. They're ready for the pandemic. They're ready to be room rated.
Megan was our set designer, so.
Yeah, yes. Awesome. Kathleen Roberts is here from Cleveland.
Hi.
Hi, Kathleen. How you doing?
Pretty good.
Okay, great. We're excited to have you here. We really appreciate it. All right, I am bringing up Roselle Benally. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hello, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Heck yeah, we're excited to have you here. And you will learn all about all of our storytellers and what they do in the context of their stories. Lastly, I'm bringing up our colleague, Brian Truett, who is a movie critic and culture critic, really, but movies especially, from USA Today. Brian, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
Heck yeah, it's a big deal when our colleagues join us on stage because we are proud to join you every day, but we're proud to have you represent your work on our stages. Thank you to all of our storytellers right now for joining us. We're going to get into the show. So you guys know our storytelling nights are not TED Talks. They're not Toastmasters. They're not a how-to, an educational lecture or slideshow. And we're really not here to sell you anything except for maybe a subscription. Instead, it's storytelling, which is based on visiting. You open your heart and your mind to pay attention to a person you care about and who you want to feel closer to. And we genuinely invite you to do that here this evening. Some of these storytellers are going to be really polished and professional and slick, and some are going to be casual and conversational and have like a much more mellifluous tone. We have not coached them on personal presentation because we believe their authentic ways of telling stories is connected to how we are able to receive them as their authentic selves. So we ask you to receive them in the spirit in which they're intended, because that is how community connecting really happens. We believe in creating empathy and understanding at all times, but it is especially vital during times of uncertainty. And it is in that spirit that we welcome up our first storyteller. We're really excited to have Lindsey L here, who is bringing us a story of making her Nashville dreams come true.
Thank you so much, Megan. Hi, everybody. My name is Lindsey L. I am originally from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, way up north. I grew up in a real music town. My parents and my brother all played musical instruments, but I was the first one in my family to choose to do this as a career. I was such a nerd in school growing up, but I would play pretty much any show around town that would have me. I would play at coffee shops, at churches, any charity environment. And I, just wanted to do anything I could to fully commit my life to the arts. I think that the arts are just such an incredible way of really examining our heart and expressing it. So I guess the first time I remember getting off the plane, flying into Nashville, Tennessee. I knew nobody. I knew one person's name on a piece of paper. His name was Billy. And I was like, well, if there's a good time to figure this out, then probably right now is the best time to figure that out. And I was a really hard worker. Hard work has been something in my life that has never scared me. And so knowing nobody in Nashville, I decided, all right, I'm just going to write as many songs and meet as many people as I could. So I started booking triples, what they call them in Nashville, which means you write 3 songs a day. So you write a song from 10 till 1 or 2, you write a song from 2 till 5, another one from 6 to 9. And then I would go to writers' rounds at night. And I just wanted to try to meet people because I knew nobody. And I would go to these writers' rounds and see these incredible songwriters play these huge hit songs that you're like, whoa, that person wrote that song. That's crazy. And then after the show, I would go up to them and be like, hi, my name's Lindsey. Would you write a song with me? And slowly, I just started to build up my network of people. At the time, I was still waitressing. I was waiting tables back in Calgary. I was playing shows and I was going to school at the time. So I would spend 2 weeks in Nashville and then I would fly home to Calgary to make enough money to buy a plane ticket to come back down to Nashville and write songs and meet as many people as I could for 2 weeks. And I'd go back and forth. And I did that for probably about a year and a half. After spending so much money on plane tickets and hotels, I was like, I have to figure out something. And so I rented this tiny little 600 square foot house with this other girl. And she was on the road with a big artist. So they would travel a lot. And whenever she would come home, she would sleep all day. And yet I was sitting around the house and I would want to practice. And so I had nowhere to practice because I would always wake her up. So I would drive my really old 98 Nissan Altima to Target parking lots and sit in the back of my car and practice and play. And as people were going into shop, I would wave at them. And it was the only place I really knew I could go that I felt safe, in this lit parking lot. So I was known as this like little blonde girl sitting in the back of her car playing and practicing her guitar. Then fast forward a few years later and I signed my record deal. And so I was able to get a visa being a Canadian and for sure moved to Nashville for good. And now I've been living in Nashville, Tennessee for 10 years. It is one of my favorite places in the world just because there are so many creative people here. There's so many people who appreciate art and all of its facet. And a lot of the town is connected to the music industry in some form. I can't believe I've been living here for 10 years. I mean, it's flown by. And I just released my sophomore album. It's called Heart Theory early last year in the middle of a pandemic. And my goodness, life before the pandemic was crazy. I mean, in 2019, I played 235 shows. I was on the road 280 days. And I was just a workaholic. And it's easy to do when you love your job so much, but it also just becomes a pace that you kind of get locked into and you don't necessarily know how to get out of it. Taking a day off was not something I was really used to doing. And yet was something I needed so much. And so I was about halfway through writing my album, Heart Theory. I'd just gone through a breakup, my first public breakup ever. And I was writing through that and realizing I was kind of writing a concept album. I was writing a record around something called the 7 stages of grief, which is one way of articulating these moments of transformation that we go through as human beings on this planet. And, it breaks it down into feelings and all of the feelings that you need to feel, and that being like shock to denial to getting angry about something to all the way to finally getting to a place of acceptance, which at this point I hadn't really gotten there yet. But I was about halfway through the writing. So I was right in like the angry / bargaining / like testing, trying to figure everything out stage. And we were on the West Coast with my band. We were playing some shows. And we had this random off day. And for the very rare chance, I was like, guys, we should just go check out the redwood forest for the day. And so we took our tour bus and pulled it into this tiny little campground and pulled our tour bus into a camping spot. And I will never forget walking off the bus, seeing these beautiful redwood trees. It was my first time to the redwood forest. And, you know, these trees are so big, you can't even wrap your arms around them. They're just so big. They're bigger than you can even imagine. It feels like you're in like this magical forest. And so we spent all day hiking and just really being in nature. And it was just such a beautiful day, a way of like filling up your cup. I feel like I don't do that enough at times. And really, that is the perfect place that really great art comes from. So after all day in the redwood forest, then we fly back home to Nashville and we all go out to see one of my favorite bands perform. I don't know if any of you have heard of a band called Wolfpack, but they're one of my favorite bands. And specifically, one of their lead singers is a guy by the name of Theo Katzman. And so Theo was playing at this little club in Nashville, and my band and I are like super fans of Theo. And so we were at front of house singing along to all the songs and doing actions and had just such a great time at this show. Then fast forward to the next morning, I wake up and I see a story. My ex-boyfriend had gotten a girlfriend. And it was one of those moments just after such a beautiful weekend and my cup was so full and my band is like my family. And then waking up and seeing that information, and you're kind of full of like so many feelings of being happy for your ex and you're so grateful for them and you really want them to be happy in life. And then you're also kind of bittersweet because you also hate how happy you are. And so I walk into this write later that day and I end up writing the song Good on You on my album Heart Theory. And it basically says, I hate how happy looks so good on you. And it was about the most honest song I could write in that given moment, being so full musically and inspirationally from the weekend, and yet waking up to that kind of news. And it was a really good example of just being as vulnerable as I could be and putting that into my music. I think that writing Heart Theory has really pushed my own boundaries that I have for myself as a songwriter and as an artist. It's the first time I've talked about my story as a little girl. I was raped when I was 13 and when I was 21. And I never wanted to talk about it because I didn't want it to become some publicity statement. And yet I did some work a few months later with some kids from this organization called Youth for Tomorrow. And they are kids who have been victims of sex trafficking or rape. And I went there to help them launch their music program and sat down with them and just heard all of their incredible stories. And after leaving that campus that day, I was like, if I don't share my story on this record that has been such a representation of vulnerability, then I'm holding back the opportunity to help other fellow survivors. So I ended up writing the song Make You on my record. That's all about my story as a little girl. And it really was one of the perfect ways to wrap up my album and living in that, final spot of acceptance, of knowing that the things that we go through in life aren't define us and define who we are, but it's how we take those things and learn from them and then, put that into our future and implement that into our lives. And so writing Heart Theory really taught me about learning about the theory of my heart, or as I would say, my heart theory. Thank you guys so much for listening to my story.
Lindsey, thank you so much for telling your story. Thank you for your vulnerability and honesty and modeling real survivorship, but now also leadership.
Thank you, Megan. I love that you guys do this project. I'm so excited for all the stories that people are yet to hear in this program. And it's just an amazing way to bring us all together, even virtually. So kudos to you guys for doing this.
No, thank you. But really, thank you for your nonprofit leadership. And, on a really serious note, we appreciate you sharing your story, being so vulnerable, direct, and authentic with our audience. And we want to say to our audience, if you can relate to Lindsey, we're putting some comments in the chat to help connect you to support. If you've been a survivor of abuse, but also Lindsey, kind of to shift the vibe a little bit. I also want to say you really modeled incredible ex-girlfriend behavior. Most of us are just quietly happy for our exes, casually being oh, good for you on Facebook. And you're I'm going to write a whole song about this. So I really want to say,
Thank you so
A lot
much
of
for
personal
saying that,
growth.
Megan. I hope he loves the song.
Oh my
we'll
goodness.
keep our fingers
You're
crossed.
such a good person, Lindsay. Ladies and gentlemen, no one can probably follow that good person vibe, but we are going to try to follow that story. So Lindsay, thank you for being on the show and opening the show so strongly.
Thank you, Megan.
Heck yeah, thank you. With that, we would like just to take a second to thank our national sponsor. If you've been watching the show during the pandemic or in the outside times, as I like to think of it, Humana has been with the show in the outside times and now virtually because they believe sharing stories connects us as humans online or in person, and those connections make us healthier people and healthier communities. They know that we need these connections literally right now more than ever. It's been a long year. Most of us this week are marking a year of reduced sort of outside times. And so we really appreciate Humana's commitment to this project and to storytelling. They also want you to know, as COVID-19 vaccinations become available in your area, they want to totally encourage you to get vaccinated if that's what you think is right for you and you've checked with your healthcare providers. If you want to know more about what Humana is doing to keep you and or your community healthy this year, check out humana.com, or you could just maybe send them a note and be like, thanks for sponsoring Storytellers. Kidding, you don't have to do that. We want to say thanks so much to Humana for sticking with us on these inside times, because we know we're going to be together on the outside too. With that, we'd like to bring up our second storyteller. Roselle Benally is here to talk about taking life experiences, turning them into art, and hopefully sharing them with you on a streaming platform or big screen soon.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Roselle, take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. And thank you, Lindsay. That was a very vulnerable story, so thanks. Yat e medakyepi she e Roselle Benally nishe oglala lakhota nishle hanagani bashishi. Dona yihipiki yucha chante washteya nape chizapikshto. My name is Roselle Benally, and I belong to the Oglala Lakota and Dene nations. Even though I grew up off the reservation, my family instilled in me the importance of introducing myself in my languages. So thank you. I'm currently a grad student. I'm a filmmaker. I'm finishing my last year at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts, finishing up their film production program. My focus has primarily been in narrative screenwriting and directing. I consider myself a storyteller. It's what I do, and it's in my blood as an Indigenous person. I'm really thankful to be here, actually, to be doing what I'm doing today, because I do consider filmmaking an art form, and I never thought of myself as an artist growing up. As a young Native kid, growing up in a small town, we were the only Indigenous family for miles. I didn't know that I could dream so big, and I didn't have a lot of role models growing up that looked like me, who were Native. I couldn't have fathomed the life I'm living today. And so, a huge part of that wasn't due to a lack of role models. However, a huge part of that was due to the fact that when I was young, being an artist meant you were struggling. My family, we were classically poor. Both my parents were artists, and there was hardly a moment in my life where financial stability existed. My father in particular was the one in charge of making ends meet for us. But at the end of the day, life was good. Life was good sometimes. I have total fond memories of my brothers and I jumping in our tan station wagon, all of us just piling everything in there, luggage, art, coolers. We'd hit the road early in the morning and we would drive to like an art market or a flea market or a powwow. We'd set up our booth and start vending my dad's original paintings and his art, his art prints. On good days, we would make money. We'd be able to eat out. We'd buy school clothes. He'd be able to pay our rent. But on bad days, we couldn't even afford gas. And sometimes our vehicle, that same station wagon, would break down. The alternator would go out. We'd be chugging up the hill, and we'd end up stranded somewhere. We had a lot of hard times, and we struggled a lot. But one of the things that I could always expect on the regular were trips to the movies and to the video store. I used to love going down the aisle and being able to select anything that I wanted that night. Those were some simple, fond memories. Was just movies. That was a time when we came together as a family, and that was a time we got to laugh, we got to cry, and we got to talk about it. We got to talk about the movies, our favorite part of the film. But with the good, there's the bad. And when things are bad, they're actually pretty terrible. My father was an alcoholic. He'd disappear sometimes, and he'd get violent, and he'd take all of our money and go on benders. And I grew up angry with my dad. And from my teenage years throughout my young adulthood, I had trouble with it. He and I had our differences. Even though he was like the native Forrest Gump, he actually struggled with a lot of trauma. And I felt that and I saw that. In 2013, he got sick. I remember getting the call. I was living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and he was in the ICU in Albuquerque at the Veterans Hospital. It was my older brother who called me, and he told me that I need to get down there quick because his health was declining. I got in the vehicle and I drove like 100 miles down the road. But you know what? I didn't make it. He died, and it was the most heart-wrenching thing I had to go through. Even in my entire life up until this day. I remember walking into the room and everyone was just so solemn. So I paid my last goodbyes to him, and we sent him off. Before he died, though, he had given me a journal, and I remember him encouraging me to write. And after he passed away, I realized he had some poetry in there, and I realized that he actually left some other writings. So I started writing. I started building off of that. The day he passed away, all the resentment that I was carrying throughout my teenage years had gone with him. And I spent a lot of time being heartbroken and grieving. And there's something about losing a parent that really makes you have to step up into your own. And for the following years, I felt like a pivotal time in my career, but I was also in like the darkest time of my life, following the death of my father. And I was in a rut. I was in a total creative rut. But on the plus side, I was living in a very beautiful home in rural New Mexico, in Cuesta. And I was there, living in an art residency, and I was falling in and out of depression, and I was isolated. And I guess, we can all relate to the isolation now that, we have survived a pandemic for the last year. But during that time, I was just plain old depressed, and I had found that journal that my dad had given me, and I had put it away for a while, and I had just started journaling back in it again. And I would do that day after day, and then I just realized that everything that I was putting in this journal, I could actually turn into a movie. And that's kind of when I decided to write my first feature, which is a film called Winter in Black Mesa. But ultimately, when I came out with that first draft, I knew that I couldn't put it out there as is because it was kind of a dark film. And for me as a filmmaker, my belief is that every film that I make has an energy and carries a spirit. And whatever energy I put into that film, however I foster that spirit, is what people are going to connect to. And so I have to do things like in a good way, and I can't put too much of my darkness into something, because I don't ultimately want people to feel dark and depressed like me. I do have a responsibility as a filmmaker, not only to my crew, but also to my audiences. And even as a storyteller, even what I'm sharing with you today, it's going to affect you. So hopefully when I'm done, you leave with a sense of hope, but I'll just keep going. But so I went in and I rewrote and I wrote my film, and it became its own entity. And then after a while, I just had this like kind of beaming moment. Like I couldn't just saturate this thing with my grief, and that it was okay to build a healthy and safe space that was just reserved for those like deep, dark emotions, and not let my grief bleed so much over into my work. It's a learning process, and I have to learn how to balance my vulnerability. And ultimately, I have to learn how to keep myself safe in the process of making art. I don't want to get myself lost in my depression and it affect everything that I do. So right now, Winter in Black Mesa only exists in script form, and it's the first feature I have ever written. It's about a father and daughter reconciling. It takes place on the Navajo reservation. It's set in contemporary times, and it's not a film that's riddled with trauma or poverty. And it's not a lot of those things, because for me as an Indigenous filmmaker and storyteller, I feel it's important to upend a lot of these tropes that people see about us and that what people know about us. So it's not a film where we're relics of the past, where it's not a film where, it's a film of hopefully hope. And it's a film about seeing two Indigenous people reconciling. I often think about my role as a young Indigenous woman making movies and telling stories, and I think about just myself as a child in like 1998, sitting in front of the TV, wondering like why none of these characters look like me, and that's something that's always like in the back of my mind, because we are living, breathing people existing in society. We're not historical artifacts. And when I think about my process of writing Winter in Black Mesa, I think about it almost like as if it's me as a grieving child, and I went in and I did it, and I'm coming out on the other side with a beautiful script and a beautiful story. And it's a piece of art that I made that came from my heart, and I'm really proud of it. I am. And I hope one day I can show it to you guys, and you can see it in theaters or on your streaming platforms. And if there's some little kid just like me that's watching my film one of these days, and they see themselves and they feel empowered, then I will have done my job as a storyteller. Thank you. Wopila Tranka Ahihe Hechadie.
Roselle, thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your storytelling. Truly tonight, thank you for telling such a complex and nuanced story with so much grace and heart. Also, I wanted to ask you, can you tell us about your beautiful jacket?
Oh, this is a shirt from my good friend, Jamie Okuma. She's an Indigenous designer based out of California.
Well, it's fabulous, and I assumed it had a story like so many other things. Yeah. So thank you so much for your story. Also, thank you for representing gorgeous Indigenous fashion here on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, yes. And also, if you guys are out here watching, we're like putting out into the universe that Roselle's screenplay gets, that we see it, what did you say, on a streaming service near you or a drive-in or whatever's next for cinema?
It has to get made.
Okay.
So I'm ready to make this thing.
Awesome. Well, we're ready to be in your audience. Thank you so much, Roselle. Thank you. It is a joy to bring up Ellen Gould. Ellen came to us, I want to tell you guys, from a totally different storytelling show, and we have brought her back as a team by our popular demand. She was part of some custom work we did, and I don't want to hype up Ellen too much, but I know that she can live with it. And so we want you to know we brought Ellen in from another show, and we're excited to share her story with America tonight. Ellen, take it away.
Thank you, Megan. First of all, Roselle, bless your beautiful spirit. I am absolutely certain that all of us are going to get a chance to see your movie, and I, for one, cannot wait. Really deeply touched. So, hello, everyone. I'm Ellen Gould. You know that. I'm originally from Worcester, Massachusetts, and I kind of do storytelling as, for a living as an actor. And if I had to give a title to the story that I'm going to tell you tonight, it would have to be My Big Break. Accidents happen and make a mess in the middle of our lives. But when things fall apart, just call on your inner artist. We all have one. She can take those broken pieces and make something new and beautiful out of them. Accidents can be genetic. I started losing vision at the age of 7, though I didn't know it at the time. I just knew I couldn't make sense of the chalk marks on the blackboard, no matter how close I sat or what new glasses I got. And my teachers had started sending report cards home with, she's one of the brightest children in the class, but she doesn't work up to her ability. At 7, I felt like a total failure. But I was good at singing and I loved to act. So whenever I couldn't see what was on the blackboard, I would just imagine myself on stage, the star in a show of my own making. I just never imagined that I would end up writing and performing my own solo musicals, but I'm getting ahead of my story. At 15, I was finally diagnosed with Stargardt's disease, an inherited form of macular degeneration that usually affects older adults. This genetic accident left me legally blind with dark shadows in the center of my vision. It also made it really hard for me to read regular print without a mega magnifier. But I discovered that if I pressed my face close enough to see the page, I could quickly memorize everything that was on it, down to the last comma. This quirky ability served me really well when I started to make my career in the 70s in New York City, because auditions were mostly cold readings. Hard enough for a fully sighted actor, but for me, I was terrified to let anybody know I was visually impaired, because I had sort of dared to do that at my first few auditions, and then I'd hear, "Thank you, next." But crazy determined and armed with this ability to memorize at a glance, I had, started getting small roles, and I was building a resume. And then my first big break, I got a part in a workshop at the Public Theater, and I was going to perform on the same stage that premiered a chorus line. Okay, it was not the lead role, but it was the Public Theater. The morning of my first rehearsal, dressed in my downtown best, hair and makeup, agonizingly perfect after more than an hour in the magnifying mirror. But now I'm running a little late, so I figured I'd better spring for a taxi after what it took to get this done. Traffic was bad that morning. There was this huge Con Edison truck parked at the intersection of 9th and 5th, and I had to walk all the way to the back of the truck to get out on the street to hail a taxi. And the cabs are whizzing by me, and I'm facing the oncoming traffic, my hand permanently ready to hail anything that comes by because I can't see the little light that's on the top of the cab that tells you when it's available. And all the time I'm thinking, oh shit, I'm going to be late for my first rehearsal. And then I saw it, a cab. It was pulling out of his lane and it was coming toward me fast, so fast, I thought it might hit me. So I took a step back and I disappeared. I heard more than felt the crack as my ribs hit something metal. I also heard the cabbie gun his car and take the corner as fast as he could. I guess he didn't want to deal with the fact that his prospective passenger had fallen into a manhole. Luckily, I'd fallen in sideways at an angle, wedged in like a straw in an ice cream soda with just my head and shoulders sticking out. I looked around in the street and there was nobody there. Then I saw some shadows moving in front of the arch at Washington Square Park. I knew there was no way I was ever going to be able to call out to them, but then my classical voice training kicked in. Use your high voice, maximum sound, minimum effort. I managed a shallow breath and then, somebody help me! I repeated over and over like a dotty diva delivering her dying aria. Somebody help me! The shadows in front of Washington Square Park, they stopped. Then they started running toward me, and then suddenly there they were looking down. Scusi, are you all right? Italian tourists. Of course, Italians, drawn by the sound of my soulful aria. My Italians ran to call 911 at the phone booth. There were no cell phones in those days. And as the ambulance was whisking me off to the emergency room at St. Vincent's Hospital, I'm thinking, Madonna, I'm going to miss my first rehearsal. A few hours later, lying in a hospital bed, the doctor broke the news: 3 broken ribs and a badly bruised kidney, along with his prescription, 3 months of complete bed rest, young lady. Damn it, I thought, imagining that beautiful public theater stage without me on it. There goes my big break. I spent the next 3 months in bed, writing my first solo musical, Confessions of a Reformed Romantic, about the gut punch of getting your dreams dashed. And then with the settlement I got from Con Edison, whose workers had gone on a coffee break without putting a protection around the hole, I developed the show enough to shop it around until a daring producer decided to put it in his season. Confessions became a cult hit with a rave review in the New York Times, and I'd finally gotten my big break, but not in a way I ever would have imagined. My career had taken off, and from that point on, I just did my own solo musicals, all leading up to that dream come true moment when I got 2 Emmys for one of those shows. And here's the kicker. In a glorious act of fate, that award-winning show premiered at the Public Theater on the very same stage as that workshop. You know, the workshop I would have been in if I hadn't fallen into the manhole. And now, after all these years, I feel like I've come full circle. In late 2019, I opened my new solo musical, Seeing Stars. It's about 5 women who, like me, have Stargardts. They're legally blind, but share a special kind of sight. I wrote it to honor the little girl who once felt like a failure. I wrote it to honor the extraordinary women I had the privilege to portray, women with unique abilities who inspire the rest of us to make something beautiful from our limitations. I wrote it to tell stories about the accidents that happen to all of us, whether through our genetics or on the streets of our lives. Accidents that break us open and make us put ourselves back together in unexpected ways, forcing us to find freeing us to imagine a more fulfilling path than the one we had set for ourselves. We are the writers of our own lives. And with a little bit of help from our inner artist and more than a little bit of humor, we can take the pieces of our shattered stories and remake them into tales of triumph. Or at least get a damn good story out of our next big break. Thank you for listening.
Ellen, thank you for your story and your charisma and your enthusiasm and your singing. Oh my gosh, I so appreciate it.
I didn't think I was going to sing there, but I had to get one phrase in.
You were moved, Ellen. The moment it took you in its arms and it held you. We felt it.
It was, I love being here. I love being with all of you. And Megan, you set the most beautiful tone for this, for all of our stories. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ellen. I'm just trying to match your energy, your enthusiasm. Thank you so much, Ellen. This is the moment in our storytelling show where we let you in a little bit of a secret. All of our storytellers tonight literally got a box of brownies. So if they seem high energy and happy, it's because they've been fortified with sugar and chocolate. The Fairy Tale Brownies Company has been supporting storytellers since 2014, and they're sticking with us during the pandemic. Normally, if you come to our live shows, you get a free brownie if you're a subscriber to any of our local market publications. But during the pandemic, we can't do that because the shows, are online only. And so they've stuck with us by sending all of our storytellers a little thank you gift for participating in the national shows. We want you to have a little thank you gift. So you saw there was a little mention on the bottom. There's a little discount if you're a viewer. We want you to take advantage of Fairy Tale Brownies and its offer. And I really want you to know this. They're real people. Eileen and Dave, they're nice people who support us and the show in the normal times and during the pandemic. And while we can never really promise you like perfect, happy, sweet, amazing endings at the end of all of our stories on this show, because sometimes they're complex, if you visit brownies.com, you can always guarantee yourself a sweet ending. Thanks, I thought of that myself. Okay, with that, so thanks Fairy Tale Brownies for supporting our storytellers and the project. With that, I am bringing up Brian Truett, our colleague at USA Today. Hi, Brian, who's going to talk to us. Who's going to talk to us about his role at the news in our news organization and his true love and passion for cinema. Thanks, Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian. I'm the movie critic for USA Today, and so I'm going to tell you a little story about my origin story of sorts. I spent a lot of my childhood doing the same thing I do now for work, sitting in a darkened room watching movies, and growing up in the Northern Virginia suburbs in the 80s, my mom and dad pretty much, I was very lucky because they took me to most everything I would ever want to see, except for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. My mom heard about the whole heart ripping out scene, and it was a no-go for 8-year-old me. But it was bummed me out because I was always in the action films, Harrison Ford, Sylvester Stallone, Kurt Russell. They were all cool. But they were no John Williams. And seeing so many films, I developed a real love for movie scores. And John Williams was my main man. My face was blown off every time I heard the Star Wars theme and it hit in a movie theater. Indiana Jones's theme made it cool to be an archaeologist. Superman's theme made you believe a man could fly. all gave me chills as a kid. So when I was 11, I made the stressful transition from a private Christian school to a public middle school. I was kind of worried it was going to be a little bit too 21 Jump Street for me, but I wanted to try something new because at that point, I didn't really have an identity. I liked comic books, I liked movies, but nothing that really made me me. So I decided to try beginning band in 7th grade, where I showed up on the first day, and there was 8 of us. 8 people wanted to play saxophone. No kidding. And you can't really have a band. So our teacher took us each aside and said, okay, we've got to have you play something else other than saxophone. So she gave me a baritone to try. I didn't know really anything about it. You have your trumpets, your trombones, saxophones, that sort of thing. But I didn't know much about a baritone. But I wasn't in pop music at all. But I had bought a double cassette of John Williams' British brass bands playing John Williams music. So I thought, well, serendipity, maybe. So I wasn't a hard sell. Thing is, I was really terrible at it. After a couple months, my band director again took me aside and said, we need to change. Kind of gave me the hook. And so she pointed over to this big honking thing on the side of the band room, and she said, well, why don't you try to play a tuba? And she gave me this big the mouthpiece is about that big. And I put my lips around it. It was like sticking my lips in a toilet bowl. It was so huge. And I was just like, I don't know about this. It was not love at first sight. But then I started thinking about the fact that, tuba was a big deal in Jaws and the theme music from Jaws. So again, serendipity, maybe I should give it a try. I didn't have anything better to do other than homework. So I started practicing a lot. I was a pretty antisocial kid. So there was a lot of time for practicing. And so I got really good at it. So by middle school, and then I became the tuba guy. That became my identity. So then that carried over into high school. The Science and Tech Magnet High School I went to. I was not good at science. Tech wasn't much better, but I was, the tuba guy there. And then that again carried over to college. When I went to college at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I majored in music performance and played in every ensemble I could find. Marching band, jazz band, orchestra, brass quintet. I put together a doo-wop tuba ensemble one time. We were pretty awesome. I danced around Disney World with a sousaphone one summer. It was the best summer of my life. But from the start, my mom insisted I have a backup plan because, maybe music wouldn't work. I mean, it's a hard career to have, and she wanted me to double major. So I liked English classes. I liked writing. So on a whim, I took an entrance exam for the journalism program there, and I did well enough. So I got in school on journalism school there, and this became my life for a few years, having my tuba be the priority and journalism's kind of the hobby. So I decided to go to grad school in Texas for music, which seemed smart to me at the time. I auditioned for 2 colleges, Southern Methodist University and the University of North Texas. I chose the latter, mainly, probably my mom doesn't want to hear this or anybody doesn't want to hear this, but I was really into pop music at that point and rock music. Meatloaf had went there. So I figured, again, serendipity and all. So I gave that a try. And North Texas was one of the top music schools in the country. So it wasn't like I was following Meatloaf to Texas or anything. But one thing the SMU tuba professor said stuck with me. He said, your GRE scores are so strong. You have this journalism degree. What are you doing this for? So and that stuck with me. So in the fall of 1997, I landed in Denton, Texas, and immediately I hated it. I immediately, I drove there and just getting out, just seeing what was around me. I didn't like it, for real. From the first day, I knew I didn't belong. I missed my friends. I missed my parents. I missed everything I had left behind, both at home and at school. I was also burned out. I had been playing, I played in every ensemble I could find in college. And, I'd been playing a lot of tuba at that point. And people around me there in North Texas practiced like 12 hours a day, it seemed like. And that just wasn't me. I had written for the UNC college paper, and I started doing so at North Texas. And that irked my tuba teacher. I still loved playing, but I woke up and went to bed every day not wanting to be there. And I weirdly got into schoolwork. I got straight A's for the first time since Christian school. But I often, I was living in this 8x20 dorm room, and I often isolated myself in a not great way mentally. I lived in that room, and I never really came out of that room very much, and it started feeling claustrophobic, and it all took a toll. So after the end of my first year, the Marine Band, which had been my dream gig since high school, was holding tuba auditions back home, around DC. So I made a deal with myself. I'd keep going. If I did well, I keep going. Obviously, I would have a job, so of course I would keep going. If not, or even if I did okay, I'd maybe keep going. But if not, it's probably time to leave grad school and tuba behind. Well, I didn't get past the first cut, and Metallica probably wasn't going to hire an electric tuba player anytime soon. So I figured, okay, well, enough's enough. Let's do something else. So I came back home to Northern Virginia and quickly landed a job as a sports editor at a local community paper at age 21. Thanks, Mom, for that backup plan. I was able to do a little bit of everything, write, edit, layout, and I moved on to a bigger paper where they had an entertainment editor position open up. And that was the first time I really got to use my music knowledge and my movie knowledge in a real way. I did CD reviews, and I sometimes used terms from my music theory classes that probably made me sound a wee bit pretentious. I interviewed bands like My Chemical Romance and Poison and Nickelback before they came big and everyone hated them. And then I began a road toward more movie writing that included changing outlets and ending up at USA Today, where I now review movies and interview the likes of Harrison Ford, Sylvester Stallone, and Kurt Russell. That same flexible, what the heck, go for it mindset I had back when I played music as a kid has now carried over in my journalism career, where people really thrive when they give everything a try. And some things have changed over the years. I dusted off my tuba a few years ago to play as a community band member at George Mason University, but put it back again. I used to be really good, and now I'm not anymore. It just wasn't the same. I didn't connect with it. I didn't connect with music or my horn or anything else the same. So I've kind of put it away again, and that's okay. I still love John Williams though, and I've even had the pleasure of interviewing him a couple times. This man's a legend. He's the Mozart, Bach, Beethoven of our generation. And he's also warm and engaging and humble man who, more humble than he needs to be. And it's kind of fun picking his brain just about, music and life and things like that. And I've always played it cool, but I've never told him, hey, you changed my life. And that's okay. That's okay though, because, it matters the most to me that he meant that much to me. And I think it's fulfilling to look back and recognize inspiration. Maybe somebody meant a lot to you in a small way, but it had a huge impact to you, inside. But be thankful that are part of your heart forever in that way. And even though it was obvious in retrospect, I found it hard to recognize at the time that, this dream I had wasn't doing me any good anymore. I think when that happens, I figured that if you find things that you do love, that you can create something else new for yourself that it's fulfilling and can satisfy you in a way that maybe the other thing didn't. So at least to a little degree, I am still very much that little boy who watches movies in the dark and lets these fantastical stories wash over them and relishes that thrill when a John Williams score taps into a familiar part of my soul. And thank you for listening to my story.
Brian, thank you so much for telling your story and acting so cool about talking to Harrison Ford. No big deal.
Yeah, it's cool.
I'm always excited. I'm like, oh, Brian, that's awesome. But also, thank you so much for what you do to make it more accessible for our audiences to understand films, understand the people who make them. We really appreciate your journalism.
Well, and thank you for having me too. I tell so many other people's stories. I've never talked about this story to anybody, really. And it's a cool thing. I love being part of these storytellers. Lindsey's Heart Theory, that friggin' album rules. Go listen to it. And these people have such cool stories, and I'm honored and humbled to be part of it. So it's cool.
Man, thank you. We'll tap you for a blurb later. That's a joke about movies. But also, Brian, I appreciate you telling your story because so many people want to know how you get a job like yours. And so I really appreciate you showing everybody that there's not always just a direct path and that you have to follow your passion, but you also have to really hustle and learn a craft and be really disciplined. It's a blend of both like passion and I think rigor. And that's what your story really showed us.
Yeah, kids, go have a failed music career, and then you can end up here.
I wasn't going to say that, Brian. I was trying to make it sound better. Awesome. Also, if you guys can hear that in the background, my kiddo is in the next room because, we're still here shooting shows from my house. So that's George. At the beginning of the pandemic, he was 5 months, and now he's 17 months. So he has a lot to say now. So God bless him. With that, we are ready to round out our show with Kathleen Roberts. We're excited to bring her to you right now, Kathleen, from Cleveland, where she's going to talk to us about finding her voice.
Hey, thanks for having me. You know, if we stay present, no matter the circumstances, life can teach us, life can be a teacher to us and can guide us even through the roadblocks that we go through. It can show us what's most important to us through the good and bad. And for me, that's been connecting with people through my art. For me, um, this story represents an important lesson life has taught me through my journey. So I'm a musician and I learned how to play bass in high school. And the things I've been through before nearly broken my spirit and made me scream for an outlet. My brother's friend Kevin taught me how to play bass initially and gave me one of his basses before he left for college. Nearly immediately, I wanted to be in a band. I didn't necessarily want to be in the front as I am in my band. I was really shy at the time, and I didn't think that I had the spirit to overcome myself in the way that my heroes I admired have, like James Brown and Joe Strummer of the Clash. Months became years into finding a band to play with, and it's definitely hard to find a gig without having a car and being able to afford a car. Instead, I learned to accompany myself on bass, um, just singing covers and writing and performing my own songs in coffee shops. And even through everything I was going through, my music and my songwriting became my catharsis, um, like my journals. So really, I feel like this story starts here in the spring of 2011. I was 20. I was really unsure of myself still. I was idealistic and I was definitely a dreamer, but I was still battling the shyness and anxieties from my past. And at that time, my focus was more so on vocation and finding finding a job and making money for the family. But still, subconsciously, my mission was on my music. Sitting in my room, brooding, listening to Van Hunt's "The Night Is Young." I had just come home from my second year at my second college, but I had just transferred. Um, I was at school looking to be a instrumental performance major, but instead I found myself at home again. Like many students at the time, uh, college is pricey and my student loans wouldn't go through. And it really took me to a low place. Um, because because the battle to even get to school was particularly difficult. I was really embarrassed. I was devastated. Um, Sorry, I'm already so moved by the other stories. Um, this one means a lot to me too. But explaining why I was home, uh, having to explain that I was home grew grew in me shame, and I did brood. But thankfully, I had a computer from school, so I also Googled. um, it just seemed like a rabbit hole of things that I lacked. And I had to find a way to make money. A lot of jobs require that, a lot of jobs require that you have a car. Uh, how do you get a job? You have to have an interview. How do you have an interview? You have to have experience. Uh, how do you got to have a high GPA, good credit, all of that. And to my disappointment, um, you know, it was just a really hard time that I was having. So, in my Googling, um, one of the things that I did is to Google how to be more confident and how to do that in interviews, but also just in general. And so, one of the things that really caught my attention was this article that really talked about it more so in a physical way, and the way they talked about putting your shoulders back, head high, like spine and neck in alignment, and putting your chest out to present. And that made so much sense to me when I thought about it. Um, Fake it till you make it never did make sense to me. It didn't seem genuine, but this did because it's something that you feel it, and then out of that feeling you react. So one of the things that I did after that, like just Googling, I I realized I needed to get out of my head and I needed to pursue some other ways that I could move forward. And for me, I thought about volunteering. So one of the programs that I looked at to volunteer, they were going to hospitals and playing for the patients at hospitals. And to my disappointment, this program that I looked at, they required a degree. And I thought to myself, like, why would you need a degree you know, um, to volunteer and play for patients? So I thought to myself, like, I'll just collect a whole bunch of different nursing homes and hospitals, and I'll make some calls and see who I can get to take me in and let me play. And so I did, and eventually, one there was one hospital really close to my house that I was able to get a ride to. And I remember my dad driving me up there, and I got out and I signed in with the intake lady, and I began to play on my acoustic bass in their lobby. And while I was there, I really was feeling like, I was feeling good, but I was also feeling embarrassed to be there, kind of like, what am I doing here? Kind of, I'm just sitting in the lobby, and people are coming in and out, and that was great, and I was happy to be playing, but I still was feeling that shyness come up, and so a nurse came up to me and she invited me. She said, "Hey, we actually have some uh, patients upstairs who we would love for you to come and play to if you'd be open to doing that." And I said, "Sure." And I followed her upstairs to the wing and began to play my bass there, play some songs up there. And the nurse came back and she said, "There's a lady in this one room who we would really like you to play for. She's been here a while." And so I went in her room and I asked her what song she would want me to play. And she was saying, "You Are My Sunshine." So I started playing that on my bass and singing to her. And as I was playing, just was feeling again. I was really in my head, and I was feeling out of place. And I was thinking, like, I'm being loud. These people are just trying to rest, and I'm making all this noise. But after I finished playing, she said to me, like, "I'm really glad that you're here," and she she just said, like, she appreciated me being there, and she hadn't really got a lot of visitors at the hospital, and that really meant a lot to hear her say that. I wasn't expecting her to say that necessarily, but um, I was really happy to hear that. And on hearing that, I realized in that moment, like, wow, my whole thought process there was totally on myself and how, my emotions and how I was feeling, even if it was anxiety. And maybe if I had been thinking differently about singing to her, I could have focused more on the connection. And so after that, like, I made it my goal when I perform too. Sorry, I'm a softie. uh, I made it my goal to really focus on that. And so um, now in 2019, uh, uh, my band, the Katie, we we got to uh, we got to do a big show uh, for this band, Thievery Corporation, which I didn't really know, like, how big it would be. Um, but it was amazing. We went in we went into the venue at Newport Music Hall in Columbus, Ohio, and it was huge. It was I guess my brother told me it's like 1,000 to capacity, or 2,000 or something like that. And I wasn't expecting that at all when we showed up. So I was looking around and, you know, starting to feel like a lot like I did in the hospital, feeling like, where do we go? What should we do? Getting, not wanting to be in the way of anybody or anything. And uh, I remember setting up and getting ready with the boys on stage. Um, the tech the tech people came up to me, the lighting guy and the stage manager came up to us, and he said to me, like, what kind of lighting would you like for the show? And I said dark. So like we went out on stage finally, and I started to play, and I felt myself getting that nervous again. And when I did, though, I grounded myself. I put my shoulders back. I had my spine in alignment, and I presented. And I looked somebody in the eye, and I felt like we really connected. Um, I really enjoyed being able to do that show, and uh, that's my story.
Kathleen, thank you for your story. You got through it. We're here. We were with you the whole time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also, I love the Thievery Corporations. It was a very exciting big finish. Kathleen, thank you so much for your vulnerability, your honesty, and your insight. It is so moving. Our chat and my text messages are filled with people who are watching and saying they were crying right along with you. So,
thank you.
Well,
I appreciate that.
We appreciate you and your story. Thank you so much. I'd like to take a second to bring up all of our storytellers right now so we can all thank them. Ellen, Lindsey, Brian, thank you guys so much. Roselle, thank you. We are so appreciative of your artistic talent, of your willingness to share it, and your bravery of telling stories in so many mediums. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. Thank you. And to all of our viewers, thank you for joining us for this storytelling night. We know it is all in our hearts that we are able to go see live music, visit museums, go to movie theaters, do things outside our houses and interface with the arts in a million ways, live theater, et cetera, et cetera. So with that in our hearts, we appreciate you watching tonight's show. If you've checked out the comments or you're in the likes or something like that, we have worked hard to put the the websites and connection points for all of our storytellers here this evening so that you can follow up with each of them in your own time, maybe download their music or check out their other work. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you soon.